destruction of the 3 World Trade Center towers in New York City on September 11th, 2001, and a whole lot more. This is 9/11 Free Fall. Hello everyone, this is Andrew Steele, and here we are yet again for another important episode of this show. And when I say important, I mean it. This is going to be an important episode in terms of documenting the history and work of the 9/11 Truth Movement, and a new record for the show as we have 5 guests on at once here to talk about the latest chapter in the John McCain 9/11 Truth Saga. These folks and myself met with a member of McCain's staff last week and laid out the evidence for the controlled demolition of the towers. I'm going to be introducing you to some of them who have not been on this program before and reintroducing you to others, including Super Pam Senzee, who was responsible for organizing this meeting and doing all the necessary rabble-rousing to get this meeting to happen. So stay tuned. We'll be getting to these guests in just a few moments. Now, for anyone that's tuning into the show for the first time, maybe you've stumbled onto it somewhere on YouTube or at No Lies Radio in the archive, you may have no idea what this show is about or the topic we cover here, so let me state it now. This show covers 9/11 truth with a focus on the science and activism being done to expose the science truth, in particular the fact that the Twin Towers and World Trade Center Building 7 were brought down in a pre-planned controlled demolition on 9/11. The science is not hard to understand, folks. The hardest part is being honest with yourself and being willing to accept the reality of the situation that we're all in. Your government officials and the corporate media pundit that you like the most are covering this up from you, either actively or by looking the other way and running from the evidence whenever it's presented to them. They have no interest in helping you, folks. They only want to handle you. And they are only motivated by what's good for their careers, their fame, or their bank accounts. All right, they respond to important issues like this only when they're threatened by something, and I'm not talking about violence, I'm talking about the mass awakening and the fact that more and more people are beginning to realize just how irrelevant these folks are. All right, the majority of these people in so-called power are not contributing to American society except to act as glorified customer service reps, appeasing you with pleasant words and diverting you with lies and distractions while the walls and carpet are set on fire around you. The truth about what happened to the buildings in New York on 9/11 is the water that will put the fire out and send these people scrambling. Now, the group at the forefront of this battle is Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. This organization constitutes the scientists and experts on the front lines of exposing the official lie of what destroyed the buildings in New York 11 years ago. You want to wake people up quick? Give them a copy of the movie Blueprint for Truth or 9/11 Explosive Evidence, Experts Speak Out, and sit down with them and watch it. All right, make them face the truth of what happened on 9/11. The people at AE 9/11 Truth are motivated only by the desire to unearth this reality before it's too late. And when I say that, folks, I mean that. All right, think of the other side. Whoever brought down the towers. Any group of people willing to bring down the Twin Towers in the middle of New York in broad daylight and kill all those people are willing to do anything they think they can get away with. All right, the longer we don't make their crime known, the more emboldened they will become. And who knows what they will do next? And if that thought doesn't motivate you to speak out and volunteer with AE 9/11 Truth, then I don't know what will. Now, I don't have any kids, but I'm conscious of the world I'm handing over to yours. I know there's a lot going on right now in the world, and these are all symptoms of the post-9/11 world. But the big, black, beating heart of this monster is this event that politicians are happy to invoke when they're destroying your rights, but flee from it when you ask them any questions about it. All right, so you need to rise up. You need to speak boldly. You need to point the finger at them. Don't let some guy in a tie tell you to shut up. Don't let them act like they have some kind of monopoly on deciding what's reasonable discourse here in our American society. All right, you are the light that's going to wake up others and make the rats hide. You are the one who America is counting on. All right, so that's AE 9/11 Truth. Go there right now. And also, before we get to our guests, I want to remind you that Rethink 9/11 is in play. All right, this is the chance. This is the D-Day for 9/11 Truth. All right, so if you have an idea, if you have something that you want to do in your community for the cause of 9/11 truth, for spreading awareness of Building 7 and the Twin Towers and the nanothermite, then this is your chance. You need to go to rethink911.org and check that out. And this is a great opportunity, but every day is an opportunity to spread the information about this topic, okay? And it is up to you. The great thing is that it's decentralized, but then that means that there's a lot of personal responsibility put on you to figure out how to spread the word. And I've always said this, is that the only way that you lose in the battle for 9/11 truth is if you are not speaking out, if you are not swinging at that ball as it comes over the home plate in front of you. All right, every moment, every day is an opportunity to talk about this. And maybe you're not as open about it as me. Maybe you're not as used to talking about it all the time as I am. So, because I've become very unapologetic in my own talk about this particular topic. I don't really care about the nervous smiles. I don't really care about the worried looks about people who just want to keep the polite chit-chat going, because that's what our society is about now. That's what our society is about. It's about keeping lies protected by being polite, by being politically correct, not going there. They always say don't talk about politics in the open society. Well, who's telling you that? And I don't consider it politics. And I ranted about this on another show. This is not a political issue. All right? This show you are listening to right now, 9/11 Freefall, does not talk about politics. All right, I don't care about politics. I don't care about polls. I don't care about who wins this seat or how this particular person is figured out a plan to deceive the American public, as they openly talk about on these programs that talk about politics. What we talk about here is a murder investigation. It is a murder investigation that is the most important issue facing our public right now, and all of these things that people care about. And I'm not saying that people aren't legitimate in caring about them, because things have gone insane. All right, I think about relatives who passed on before 2001, shortly before 2001. I've had this discussion with people in my family, talking about a particular person who's no longer with us, and how this world that they, if they were suddenly here with us right now, how this world is so different than the one that they left behind. You'd have to explain to them this event, this 9/11 event, and what the official explanation was, and then how that's not even true, and how we've invaded these countries, and how we're losing our liberties. To get them to catch up. But it's not the world they would recognize. And a decade in the big span of time, people, is not a very long time at all. So it's happening. And regardless of what you think is going on in terms of a bigger agenda, at the very core of it, at the very center, what it's prefaced on is this event that we talk about every week on this show. That's why it's so important to expose it, because it is so obvious. It is so in your face. Looking at Building 7 brought down at 5:20 that day, with the sun still up, with the sky still blue, with the building still standing behind Jane Stanley of the BBC as she reported that it had already collapsed. Maybe she got her script too early. It is so obvious that you can't not expose it. You can't just sit still. I would even equate it to standing still while somebody decapitated another person in front of you and just quietly going about your day. That's what we're doing in America now. We're just quietly going about our day. We're just quietly looking the other way, nervously picking up our pace as we run by this topic. It's like a dead body laying on the sidewalk. And it's funny, I know that on TV, I don't watch TV very often, but I know that there's some network out there that always does a Twilight Zone marathon on the 4th of July. How appropriate! How appropriate to feature that on the 4th of July, because I know when the 4th of July comes, people are going to be out there waving their flags and singing all these phony country songs about how great it is to be an empire and send our soldiers to go die in needless wars, while ignoring basic laws of physics that we all have to live under, that govern our universe. It is absolutely bizarre, so I think that tying the Twilight Zone in with America and the 4th of July is completely appropriate, because if you think about it, what do we have to celebrate on the 4th of July this year? What is there to be proud of? Now, I'm not cynical 100%. I think there are things to be proud of. I think there's people to be proud of. But it's not the people you're being told to be proud of. It's not some idiotic country singer singing about how attacking other countries is great. It's not some phony news personality giving lip service to the troops and lip service to the Constitution. It's not those people. It's certainly not our politicians. It's certainly not our president. Any of them, past or present, in the last couple of decades. The people to be proud of on the 4th of July are people like you, people listening to this broadcast right now, people at AE 9/11 Truth out there spreading the word, trying to wake people up. You need to speak out. You need to be a participant in your world. And that's what this broadcast is about today. It's about showing you how to do it, or showing what other people have done, and you can build on it. Because the people on here today, they're out there in the game. They're out there in the war. And I'm proud to stand by them. All right, a few weeks ago, Senator McCain's office in Tucson had a meeting with a number of 9/11 Truth activists and experts. Those people are here on the program right now. We're going to do something a little different this week than most. I'm going to introduce each guest by name, and when I do that, I'm going to ask that you each briefly tell the audience about yourself, your background, and your experience with 9/11 Truth activism. We're going to start off with Pam Senzee.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Yes, I recently bicycled across the country with activist Rena Patty, and we left on July 25th from the coast of Washington State off the San Juan Island, and we rode to Fargo, North Dakota, and in Fargo, she went on to New York City, and I went on to Washington, D.C. And there in D.C., I filed a complaint with the FBI headquarters with the help of Attorney David Meiswinkle. And the substance of that complaint was nanothermite documentation, the peer-reviewed science research paper which documents nanothermite in the dust of 9/11, meta-science out of Mount Sinai, which documents carbon nanotubes in the lungs of first responders and in the dust of 9/11, as well as a copy of essentially the expert testimony of 43 very distinguished experts who, the gentlemen that are here on your show, all of whom are in that film, 9/11 Explosive Evidence Expert Out. So that's pretty much it. Before that, I've also been a volunteer and active for AE 9/11 Truth and in the Truth movement itself since somewhere around 2006, I think.
And Pam has been a regular on this show. We had her back on when she was doing her Journey for Truth. And imagine, folks, riding across the country on a bicycle. That's the kind of Tom Sawyer adventure that a lot of us grow up, dreaming of having. Well, Pam actually lived it, and she was spreading the truth around the country, places where she met. It's almost like a modern-day folk story, almost like a Paul Bunyan. Someday they'll be telling kids about Pam Senzee and Rena Patty. And we also had Pam on to talk about her visit to the FBI back last year as well. So she is a veteran activist here. Welcome, Pam. Our next guest is Jody Gibbs. Jody, tell us about yourself and your history with 9/11 Truth activism.
I've been a registered architect in Arizona for about 40 years. I was also licensed for general building and heavy construction about the same time. I have a bit of education and studied architecture at Yale and Harvard, and have had the opportunity to work in this country and a number of others. In terms of background with 9/11, like many others, I think I got involved about 8 years ago after seeing films and looking at information which is completely incompatible with the official story. Here in Tucson, we have brought Richard Gage twice. We've brought David Ray Griffin twice. We've brought Willie Rodriguez. We've shown films, done a great many things that have happened in other cities. On that, I just say one of the simplest things to understand is that people learn best when they are relaxed. One of the best events we did was renting a suburban movie theater and advertising the movie publicly. People would come in, buy a ticket, get their popcorn, and sit down and watch the movies that many of us are looking at. That's probably about enough. The other thing I would say is very important. In addition, people will educate themselves. You really cannot educate other people. You can give them the opportunity of seeing, and by seeing and thinking in a relaxed atmosphere, most people can make the cognitive leap that's necessary to see that the official story is clearly false.
Right, and actually that's something that we're going to even touch on later as well. I'm glad you brought that up, and that's very interesting, is that nobody's going to be educated. They're only going to educate themselves. People will accept the truth only when they're ready to accept it, and I think that as comfortable as you can make somebody, as non-threatening as the information can be, the more minds you're going to touch. All right, the next person that we have on the program here is Rick Fowlkes. Am I pronouncing that right, Rick? Fowlkes. Okay, Rick, tell us about yourself and your history with 9/11 Truth.
Yes, I'm a structural engineer, registered professional engineer for over 40 years. I have been a vice president with some prominent engineering firms in the Phoenix area, head of structural engineering departments with more than one firm. In 1983, I started my own engineering firm, and I've designed power plants, shopping center structures, commercial buildings, residential buildings, also highway structures. So heavy industrial and commercial and residential structural buildings. I became familiar with 9/11 Truth Movement. I met Richard Gage in 2004. I've been active in some appearances and spreading the message about the 9/11 Truth Movement here in the Phoenix area since that time.
Well, amazing, and thank you for stepping up and speaking out. And again, they say about experts speaking out, there should also be brave people speaking out too, because a lot of people are awake to this evidence, but as we've seen over and over again, it takes that special kind of person to put their name out there and say, hey, look, I know what I'm talking about, and these buildings were not brought down by fire and by plane impacts. All right, Building 7 wasn't brought down by just a random fire. So, again, thank you for that. David.
Yes.
David Chandler, we've had you on the show before. Tell our audience, though, who may have never heard of you, may not know about your encounter with NIST, tell us about yourself and your own history with 9/11 Truth.
Okay. I've been teaching physics and math for about 35 years. I retired just last year, and the high school and college level. Anyway, when I first heard stories about or theories that the buildings were blown up with explosives rather than natural collapses and so forth, I was skeptical, but I started looking carefully at the videos, and I had tools for doing measurements on the videos, frame-by-frame measurements and so forth. So I started doing as much analysis as I could just to try and figure it out for myself, and it became amazingly clear to me that it had to have been explosions rather than regular gravitational collapse at work. So I started putting my results of my work on YouTube, and that's what brought me to the attention of AE 9/11 Truth. I was invited onto the team, and it was by the networking with the people at AE 9/11 Truth that I heard that there was going to be this conference that NIST was going to do in 2008, where they were going to have a technical briefing conference where people could ask questions, and I was able to get a question asked at this conference. It was just an online emailed-in question, and I just asked a really, really simple question on how NIST could claim that Building 7 came down 40% slower than free fall when it was blatantly obvious that it was right out in public view, and you can measure it, that it came down at free fall for the first 2.5 seconds. And anyway, they stumbled all over the question, and so I captured the video of them responding and made a lot of comments about it, and that's sort of, I guess, how I became known in the 9/11 Truth Movement for that confrontation with NIST, and it's very clear, whatever is true of the buildings, it's clear that NIST is part of a cover-up. And you can see my work at 911speakout.org if you're not familiar with it already.
And David, I just want to say your video, the one you just described here, and I'm going to tell the audience too, is my favorite 9/11 Truth video of all of them that's been put out there. And again, it's not even that it relies on flashy graphics or anything. It's just the content. To watch NIST come undone by simply being asked a very simple question. You're my hero. I mean, it couldn't have gone any worse for them if the curtain had fallen down behind them in the midst of it. So everyone needs to check out David Chandler's video. I've referenced it many times in articles that I've written. And our final guest is Scott Grainger. Scott, go ahead and tell us about yourself and your own history with 9/11 Truth.
Thanks, Andy, and thank you for hosting this program to make other people aware of the serious problems in the investigation surrounding the 9/11 incidents. I'm a licensed fire protection engineer and civil engineer and have been licensed as an engineer for 37 years. And I'm licensed in Arizona and 13 other states throughout the United States. My practice centers on forensic engineering and fire protection engineering, and that's how I got involved in the 9/11 Truth organization about 6 years ago. And when my wife and I went to listen to Richard Gage make a presentation, and I reviewed all the material, read it, looked at the videos, and was convinced that despite what the government has told us, there are serious questions, and they continue. The government continues to beat around the bush, much like David was describing, where they just don't answer direct questions. Will reveal significant flaws in their investigation. The government investigation, in my view, is the problem here, and it was not done as an investigation should be done, with an open mind, looking for whatever you find, as opposed to having an answer already and making and twisting the facts, if you will, or ignoring the facts so that they meet your predetermined goal. That's not engineering. That's not forensic engineering. That's wrong, and that's what we're here to promote, is to get a true independent investigation of all of the facts so that we can actually determine for ourselves what really happened and who is involved in it.
Right, and I've said it on this show before, and I guess I'll revisit briefly the teddy bear analogy. I describe it as, you going to a fair and you get a teddy bear to bring home to your kid or something, but it won't fit in the suitcase, and you got to get it in, so you start stomping on it, jumping on it, trying to push this teddy bear in, even though it won't fit. By the end, this teddy bear is so mangled that you can't even recognize it for what it is. Well, that is the story of NIST's report and what the outcome was. I mean, they're trying to come up with an explanation, anything but explosives, and they will bend and jump and stomp on this thing until it's a mangled shell of what it once was, and that's what we're looking at and what we're trying to expose. Yep. So again, guys, thank you for doing what you are doing and speaking out, and for coming on this program. I know it was sort of short notice for a lot of you. Now, Pam, I'm going to go to you first on this, since you were the orchestrator of this meeting with McCain's office. Go ahead and lay out the story for our audience. Now, I've told some of the background in previous episodes, but again, we may have new listeners, may have no idea of what's going on here. So tell the history of it and what basically what led to us having this conference.
Well, what happened was Cindy Sheehan on her bike tour across the United States, her tour de peace, had come here to Phoenix. And so myself and other activists were here with Cindy Sheehan. And another group had come as well for a different reason. And McCain came out to speak to that group. It was a Saturday, so it was totally unexpected. and he was across the street, and I just looked at a friend and said, let's go try to catch him, and I wanted to tell him about 9/11 and these experts and the nanothermite and et cetera. So we ran across the street, and as we saw him going toward the parking lot, and by the time we got there, he was pulling out, and I started running toward his car, and I think he thought that I was one of the supporters from this other group because he rolled down his window. And so there I am. I just stuck my head in his window and started talking to him about my trek across the United States for AE 9/11 Truth. And the complaint that I filed with Mr. Meiswinkle with the FBI and the nanothermite and the carbon nanotube doc and 9/11 explosive evidence experts speak out. And he was saying, well, thank you, and I really hope that you bring this information, or that you brought this information to my office. So at that point, that was my intro, and I said, well, I will bring it if you invite me. And he says, of course. And so I said, can I give a presentation and may we film it? And he said yes. So we had that on film. We were not permitted to film. And I spoke with his office a couple of times, and they said, no, we just don't do that. So we did not film. We, I didn't want to blow it by forcing that issue. His office was actually, very, very gracious. I knew that McCain was faking it when he was talking to me, because I know from Professor Blair Gatsby's fast a few years back, his 17-day fast in front of McCain's office, that McCain is quite familiar with this information. But, I played along, and because we were all very respectful, his office was very respectful to us. And we did get a wonderful meeting with a staff member, and I think she was quite impressed with these experts.
Right, and we're going to get into that now. I mean, so essentially, and we're going to have the video up on 911freefall.com too for our audience to see it. You walked up to McCain, you presented the evidence to him while he's sitting in his car. He has a steering wheel in his hands. I think that's really awesome. And this is an example of what people need to be doing. A lot of times people may freeze off. They see somebody is famous, but you got to remember, these people put on their pants one leg at a time. I assume how everybody puts on their pants, and and they're no different than us, and so you can't be afraid of them. And I've said this on the show before, and this is not to sound like a threat. This is just to state a reality and empower the audience. But they are more afraid of you than you should be of them. Okay, they need you. They need your perception. You don't really need anything from them other than for them to do their job. So actually, by that reality, we are a lot more stronger than these so-called representatives, these so-called people in power, because it's not real power, it's a perception of power. So you guys scheduled the interview, and was there any trouble in trying to get this interview off, or any kind of, how soon was this interview scheduled after you had that confrontation? What did you do next?
Well, that is an interesting question, and I'm glad you brought it up, because it did take several weeks, and I think it took probably 6 to 7 weeks just to get a confirmation from his office. I initially spoke to his scheduler immediately, and when I told her, that he had invited me to give a presentation, she wanted a detailed email about the content of that presentation, and I was very detailed, and I did include the nanothermite doc. I did include the carbon nanotube doc. I did include a link to 9/11 explosive evidence experts speak out. I did mention these experts that are with us here today, and I'm sure I included the AE 9/11 truth site. So it was very, very specific. And then I thought, well, they're going to stonewall me, because it was week after week after week, and I had made a few calls to his scheduler. And so, at one point I called the office and I said I need to speak to her supervisor. And they said, well, they just resisted that. And I said, well, I'm really having trouble getting to the office. I've been invited personally by Senator McCain I have that on film, and that's been posted on a website because you included that in your article, Andy. And it gets thousands of hits. And I want to speak to the scheduler and schedule a meeting, as has been, confirmed by the senator. And so I did get, after that, I said, if that doesn't happen, then I'll need to speak to a supervisor. And so she did call the next day.
It's funny because I'm talking to you guys right now. This is sort of my debriefing because I was on the phone and I know what I said, but I didn't hear a lot of what was being said, or it sounded kind of like ghost whispers. So you have the meeting, you sit down with the woman. Tell us how did you start it off, Pam?
Well, we went in and we had a couple of very wonderful conference calls about it. First of all, which all the experts participated in, and it grew organically from their expertise. And I was really impressed with that process and grateful to be a part of it. When we went, we brought a laptop and a copy of Rick Folks brought a copy of Architects and Engineers Solving the Mystery of Building 7, which is a 15-minute short film, very excellently done, and it is narrated by Ed Asner, and people can see it on YouTube. They can purchase copies as well at the AE 9/11 Truth store. And so we proposed showing her this, and she seemed very respectful and pleased to meet these experts. Told her briefly about the tract and the FBI complaint, so she had that context. And then we started watching the film, and she at first said that we weren't sure how much time we would have, and I was told previously that you probably get about 15 minutes. And so she said, well, I was told I could have 30 minutes. And then as we talked, at some point she said, I can go up to 45, but no more than that. And it was as if she was giving us more time, and that was early on, and I think it's just because we were treating her respectfully, and I think that's a really, really, really important point to drive home to activists who are trying to arrange these kinds of meetings. Mutual respect is going to get better results. So she was very engaged during the film, and we had to stop it a couple of times because she was asking intelligent questions and giving these experts an opportunity to answer them. And we submitted a letter, which initially Scott had written. We tweaked it and decided that I should be the namesake of the letter. It included the names of all these experts. And when you want to get to that later, I'll tell you the 3 points of action that were included in the letter.
Right. Now, also, I want to go down the line here and find out what people said. We have experts here. Well, what did the experts say during this meeting? So we're going to start off with Scott. What concerns did you raise with the senator's office?
Well, I was one of the last to actually talk directly with the representative, with McCain's representative, who was just as Pam has described. She was very graceful, and she became very interested in the material the further along that we went in the conversation and through the video that we showed her. But I talked about, in general terms, the fact that all of the investigation was done by the government, for the government, and that there really were no independent investigators there. Everyone was tied in some way to the federal government, and that just on that basis, that the investigation falls into serious question. And it's easy to see now, it may not have been years ago, why that's true. Why, with all of the revelations just recently with the National Security Agency and the IRS and so forth, where the government workers are working for their own benefit, not ours. That's true of the 9/11 investigation as well. So that was kind of the points that I made, and also supported everything that Dave had brought up as far as his information on the nanothermite.
Now, Rick, same question for you. What did you mention to the senator's office?
Well, I tried to emphasize that Senator McCain has been very vocal about security failures and breaches for Libya, Benghazi in Libya, and loss of 4 lives there, including an ambassador. And McCain is in a committee position that has some power to, pose inquiries into matters like that. And so I tried to emphasize the parallels, or point out that if McCain is upset about a security failure in Libya where 4 people died, how about the colossal security breaches and failures on 9/11, where, for example, where Building 7, which is mostly what we focused on, came down in 7 seconds. All the indications are explosives have been planted in this building, and it was a building that housed CIA, FBI, SEC, securities investigations, the bunker for Giuliani when something goes wrong. That's where he was supposed to report for safety, and yet somehow these explosives were planted in this building that has top security, government security, and then the building came down in 7 seconds that afternoon. And I pointed out that it was after CNN and BBC had already reported that Building 7 had collapsed, and so there were obviously some people with foreknowledge, and there was obviously government involvement in covering up the truth, and also that there were some obviously severe security breaches. So, how about an investigation about this one, Senator?
Right, and also too, and let's go to David, because you were on there via conference call on the same phone line as me. What did you speak about to the office?
Well, I wasn't really even involved in organizing this. I just was asked to participate. But I can't remember exactly what I covered, but the 3 things that were most on my mind, I think it boils down to some of the 3 of the most damning pieces of evidence that are pretty much irrefutable. One is the dynamics of how the buildings came down, the free fall of Building 7 and the constant acceleration of the buildings, the North Tower and South Tower. This kind of behavior is totally inconsistent with a natural collapse, and it had to have been implemented with explosives to reduce the support. And the second was the strong evidence of high temperatures in the buildings. There's an article in the Journal of 9/11 Studies with that title on evidence for the high temperatures. And by high temperatures, if you take jet fuel and office fires, the maximum temperature they can burn misses the melting point of steel or iron by 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And yet, there were droplets of molten iron that had solidified as old spheres of iron scattered throughout the dust all over New York City. And that's evidence, if nothing else, it's evidence that those kind of temperatures were achieved during the building collapse. So you had to have had some sort of process going on. It was a high temperature process. And also you'd have to have a high temperature and be able to spatter the molten iron, which is, in other words, like an explosive environment. So it's very direct evidence of explosives being used. And the third was the direct discovery of nanothermite that's unreacted in the dust. And that has not achieved mainstream acknowledgement, even though it's been out there for a few years now. And those 3 pieces of evidence, more than any others, I think, are each one by themselves is an irrefutable smoking gun that the buildings were brought down, that it was with very strong insider connections, and whoever brought the buildings down or organized to have those come down had to have been central to the entire operation on 9/11.
Absolutely. And before we get to Jody, I'm just gonna say what I chimed in with. I tried to speak in a language that the senator could understand. I understand the situation. I understand McCain's position on not just this topic, but many other issues. So I tried to offer an olive branch. Now, I'm realistic, folks, but I tried to point out some things that the senator could lead into an investigation with. One of them being that the investigation was never completed. Regardless of who you want to believe brought down the towers, who was responsible, the investigation was never completed because NIST never tested their dust samples for the presence of explosives, using that circular reasoning that they don't need to test for something that they don't think is there. Well, folks, that's not a complete investigation. And so if the senator's office wants to stop hearing people questioning whether explosives were used, the simplest way to get rid of these questions would be to test the dust. Put it to rest. We have that point. We have the fact that we don't have a transparent investigation, that we have NIST refusing to disclose its computer model data for World Trade Center Building 7, citing the 2002 National Safety Team Act, that if they deem that releasing information would jeopardize public safety, they don't need to do it. That's what they cited. They will not release that data because somehow releasing this data for a building that no longer exists is somehow jeopardizing public safety. All right? And then the third point is this, and I decided to go lead in with this angle, and the audience can decide for themselves whether or not this is a good approach or if they think I'm way off. But, to put in the back seat, who to blame for this? All right, to just forget about the issue of who was involved. If the senator wants to believe that Al-Qaeda was still responsible for these attacks, shouldn't we find out whether or not they succeeded in a much more perfect fashion than we first believed? Or maybe a foreign government had access to these buildings. This is a national security issue, all right, with this overwhelming evidence that explosives were used. And I see this even like with this, when people call into C-SPAN and ask questions about the controlled demolition, the host's minds already automatically go towards, thinking the person saying inside job, and the politicians immediately go into defensive mode saying, oh, our government couldn't be behind this. We're not talking about who was behind it. We're talking about the fact that buildings were brought down in a controlled demolition, regardless of who you want to believe it is. So hypothetically, if the senator wanted to reopen an investigation on this, he could go from that angle and say, you know what, let's find out if Al-Qaeda somehow got access to these buildings. That would be an olive branch. That would be a lead-in for him to save some face in pursuing this issue. So I threw that out there. Now, Jody, you were unable to attend because of health issues, and I'm glad you're feeling better, but had you been at this meeting, what issues would you have raised with the senator's office?
Well, actually, I worked with Pam to help refine the letter that we left for Senator McCain, and I think it raises some of the very issues here. In that letter, which you need, if anyone's in the situation, you're going to try to call on an elected official at any level, the city government, state government, or federal government, you need to have a few points in mind. Number one, you need to point to them the contradictions that have been pointed out with World Trade Center 7, the free-fall demolition of that building. And it's important to leave a video with whoever you're speaking with. By looking at it once or twice or three times, they eventually overcome a great deal of their emotions. And anyone looking at the building fall with or without the assistance of an engineer, a building contractor, a person knowledgeable in demolition, a scientist, a physicist, whatever, you can see the penthouse come down earlier, you can see the building fall in a matter of seconds, and you can understand what the free fall is and why this building falls at an unusual point. Another point is, I will stress it again, is the issue of nanothermite. Nanothermite, and back to Building 7, we did point out to the senator, at least in the draft, that the collapse in World Trade Center 7 was announced in international media on the BBC 20 minutes before the building actually collapsed. A little strange to say the least. We stress the point of nanothermite. There are many points that can be stressed. This is a military-grade material. It's not something you can put together from the drugstore or from a chemist or from any other manner. And there's a lot of dust. Anybody could test the dust. Another point to stress is it's not merely architects and engineers who have formed committees and are asking for an independent scientific investigation. There are pilots for 9/11 truth. There are scientists. There are Nobel Prize winners. There are National Science Award winners. There are military decorated personnel. There are flight controllers. There are many, many, many people, thousands and thousands of Americans. There are members of families who are victims. There are first responders, firemen, policemen. All of these people are saying we need a scientific, independent, transparent investigation. And in the issue, Andy, I would say these people are quite powerful. They do own the media, or they control the media, and their primary strategy has been to call people who are scientifically looking at the facts conspiracy theorists and to block out facts from the media. We understand that, and I don't expect that's going to change for many of these people. On the other hand, we happen to have scientific evidence and what appears to be factual scientific evidence clearly showing that the official story is patently false. And the last thing we did in a letter to Senator McCain, which I hope got in there, was to ask for his office's support for a transparent, independent scientific investigation. I don't think we should be asking Senator McCain or any member of our government to reopen an investigation. They've had their chance. They've conducted wars that have gone on for more than 10 years. They spent $6.1 trillion on those wars. They've engaged in torture and rendition in Guantanamo and bugging the defense counsels in Guantanamo and saying that waterboarding isn't torture, and many, many other horrific things. So what we need to constantly be telling them is the polls are showing, some of the higher level polls in this country show that in some parts of the country, 60% of the people do not believe in the official story. Now, it is higher in other countries, because in some other countries, you do not have government saying, oh, conspiracy theorists, conspiracy theorists. On the other hand, another part of their power is money. Whether it is, and they have bribed the coalition of the bribable in the wars. We've seen that. We see them buy off government people in other countries through threat or through finance or through saying they will hold weapons or whatever. But we need to make it clear to Senator McCain and others that there is a growing number of people in the world and in this country who can think and aren't afraid to think and who can say we need an independent, scientific, transparent investigation. It may happen in this country, it may happen in another country, it may happen with an international body, but that's what we're heading for, and that's the role that I played in working with Pam and others who've done work on this draft.
Absolutely, and it's a really good letter. And I'm going to ask you, Pam, first talk about the letter that was presented. You started a little bit before, but we were saving it kind of for the end here. Tell us about the letter and about the follow-up that you plan with this action.
Right. Well, as I said before, the experts helped with this letter. I essentially, the morning of, we sort of at the last minute, I don't remember if it was the night before, the morning of, but decided that it was probably best if I just, submitted a letter and that I could include the names of these experts, and which I did. And then we decided, we took 3 actionable points to submit to McCain's office. And, I for one, think it is important to document that these things have been requested of the senator, whether or not myself or others think, that it's actually going to take place or be carried out in the way that we would think. I think it's just important, just like the FBI complaint that I filed, I think it's important to document that this has been done. They know. They know about this. So the 3 points are, we formally request Senator McCain initiate 1, seeking the release of the finite analysis examination performed by or for NIST on the structural frame of WTC-7. 2, obtaining and releasing to the public a scientific explanation for the free fall of WTC-7. And 3, a Senate investigation into the presence of nanothermite in the dust of WTC-7. So in my view, it's now public information that Senator McCain, that these requests have been made to Senator McCain, and that he has an obligation and he's accountable to follow up on this. And so in the future, FOIA requests can be made to find out what activities from his office has taken place and what exactly he's done. And I just want to commend you, Andy, for your role in all of this. You've been extremely instrumental. The article you wrote for AE 9/11 Truth was, highlighted a great deal, and also your participation in developing and planning this. And participating in the meeting in Senator McCain's office with his staffer. He was very articulate. So, I just want to acknowledge that. Kudos to you.
Oh, well, thank you for that. I think this is very important, and I'm glad you guys took the time tonight to come on the show to document this and lay out and give your own verbal accounts. And I can already hear some of the comments out there saying, well, McCain is, who he is. What's the purpose of doing this? You know what's going to happen. I think there's absolutely, this is important. This is an important stance, and what this demonstrates, once again, is that 9/11 Truth is on the side of law and order here. And I think that's an important point to hammer home with the audience, because too many times people get lost in this mindset that we're somehow outlaws in a police state, and that we're kind of on the we're in the shadows of society speaking the truth, but we're sort of against the mainstream. No, actually, we are the mainstream. We are the normal people. We are standing for law and order, and so we're going through the proper channels. And it's an act of civil disobedience as well, because they want you to stay away from their offices. They want to give you the bum's rush. They want to use the mass peer pressure against you and make it seem like you shouldn't be asking these questions. We're standing up against that, and we're going through the motions of having to do what you would do if you did discover a crime. We have discovered the biggest crime of the century here. So these are the proper channels, and we are using them. And I want to commend you guys for thinking of this and getting the ball rolling on it. Now,
Andy, this is Jody. I just wanted to say that your listeners, the people that need to see the films and have the information are the American people. And when millions and millions more of American people can understand about the controlled demolition nature of World Trade Center 7 and the free fall demolition of that building and nanothermite, then we will get some action. No one among us is expecting that change is going to happen through Senator McCain's office. The purpose of meeting with Senator McCain's office is we now have left a letter, ask him a question. We will go back and we will try to publicize that as much as we can on YouTube and on the AE 9/11 site, on our programs like yours, and in the local media, saying we've given him this information, we gave him this information this date, we think he's had this information for a long time, it's been in the public for a long time, we're continuing to ask him what's so difficult about having an independent, transparent investigation regarding nanothermite and free fall demolition of World Trade Center 7. But the job we need to do is with the American people. We clearly believe that. We're not expecting that you go knock on your congressman's door or your senator's door and that resolves it. And I just want to stress that. I'm sure many of your listeners know that. I just want to make sure we understand and we know that also.
Right, and now in our last few minutes here, and anybody just feel free to chime in on this question, but what can our audience do themselves? I mean, we're kind of laying this out so that they get an idea on how to do this and a map for their own actions, but what do you think is most important for our audience to do to bring us closer to a day when we're no longer talking about Building 7, except for the fact that it was an acknowledged controlled demolition and that awful period of history is behind us now and we all know the truth?
Okay, what I'd like to say is, first of all, they can get active through AE 9/11 Truth. They can go to the website, ae911truth.org, and click on Take Action. They can volunteer. They can start action groups. There's all sorts of things that they can do, because AE 9/11 Truth is an organization that has wedded the world of expertise with the world of activism, so that's crucial. And right now, they have a campaign going called the Rethink 9/11 campaign. You can go to rethink911.org and learn more about that. There's going to be a lot of actions, and this particular one may serve as a model for developing actions around the 12th anniversary and through the month of September. So there's going to be a lot of grassroots actions, and it's also an ad campaign in 11 major metropolitan cities around the world. So one of the things that they have, for instance, is a 50-foot billboard in New York City in Times Square. Just imagine that, about Building 7. And it's going to be there throughout the whole month of September. So this is the kind of thing that they're doing, and this is the kind of thing that people can help with. So when you hook up with rethink911.org or AE911truth.org, you can make a huge difference. You can make an absolutely huge difference. So those are the things that I recommend.
And Jody, you wanted to say something?
Well, for those people who don't know about 9/11, I think going to the AE 9/11 Truth website is a good idea, and watch the videos yourself. And you need to trust your own eyes. You need to look at things once, twice, 3 times, ask questions, and you will understand. The buildings of World Trade Center 7 are excellent. The videos that show Dr. Stephen Jones and other scientists from a number of universities who've done peer-reviewed, very public description of the investigation showing nanothermite and become knowledgeable of that. Any of the books by David Ray Griffin. Dr. Griffin is an incredible author, an emeritus professor of religion with no bones, absolutely nothing other than objective, clear writing. People like David, and watching his presentation of the free fall and collapse of World Trade Center 7, there's any number of people like David or like David Ray Griffin or like Stephen Jones who are completely relaxed, straightforward, and easy to understand. If you are in the movement, we should see, and have been, we should see that they had hoped all this would go away. The wars did not turn out the way they wanted. And not only has the war, the figure 6.1 trillion is a Harvard University Kennedy School of Government statistic. That means this war has cost for every household in the United States $75,000. And wherever you are in this country, I am quite certain that your local municipality and your local school district and your local hospitals can tell you we are in incredible trouble financially. So a great mistake was made by those people on school boards and city councils and in state government not to understand and to look at this lie earlier, and possibly some of that money and a great many lives that have been wasted in those wars could have been stopped. You have a job to take those videos, and the videos, I don't completely urge you to say one-to-one, here's your video. I urge you to call public meetings and on school campuses, in churches, in community centers, advertise, spend your money to advertise. We have the truth, we have the facts, but we have to spend money to let people know they can come and make up their own mind. And when they do come, you need to give them a handout where they can get additional information in the form of books and videos, and they will educate themselves, but they cannot educate themselves if they've never seen the video or heard these programs. So we need to work in trying to reach out to a large number of people at many levels, and the public is much more receptive for this information than they were after 2001 when they were subjected to massive propaganda. They've been able to see and assess, and they have many, many reasons to distrust their government at this point, and they do. So now is the time to spend money to advertise and get this information out and to lead millions more Americans to see why we need a transparent, independent scientific investigation of many things, but certainly these 2 issues at the beginning on free fall, demolition of World Trade Center 7, and nanothermite. And that's what I would urge everyone to do.
Well, those are words to end it with. And, I mean, this hour has gone by really quick. I want to thank everybody for coming on the program. I wish I could have had a little bit more time with you, but you guys are doing great work, and I know you're going to continue it. Folks, we are out of time. Remember, you can listen to this program every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week and good luck.